this week's episode of Automated, our weekly podcast here at Polymath Robotics, where we talk about robots, how to build them, how they hurt us, and why they're great. I, of course, am Stefan Ilia, and sitting across from me is a man wearing a matching Polymath Robotics shirt. However, he's wearing a jacket and shivering underneath a cobweb, since we're recording this on Thanksgiving Day. Why are you so spooky Thanksgiving? It's Halloween.
So, Stefan, what's changed in your life recently?
I've had a child.
So currently both co-founders are sleep deprived.
Yep. and cold, because our office has the AC running nonstop, no heat on.
No, I automated that feature at least.
Yeah, okay, the AC runs 40 hours a week during business hours.
There you go.
However, it's now
much
cold
more
outside.
fair.
So we still have the AC, which is sub-ideal.
Yeah, it's been a busy few weeks, I think.
So who exactly are you?
Co-founder here, and always the one who remains nameless on most of these episodes.
This, of course, is Automated, our weekly robotics podcast that we haven't done in many a week. We break our podcast down into two discrete sections. The first, where we play a game where we come up with a robot idea that is, farcical but not too farcical, and talk about how to build it and productize it. And the second is where we talk about some sort of subject in robotics. And Ilia, what are we going to be talking about today?
We're going to be talking about basically how difficult it is to productize anything in robotics.
Yep.
And why, unlike other kind of modern tech companies, you can't just really do one small piece. That hasn't really become a thing quite yet.
And this may or may not have been inspired by debates with our faithful producer, who's at home with a COVID scare right now, arguing with me about how many things we can call a product at once. So with that, let's get going on our game.
All right.
Sound effects. All right. So Ilia and I both have a stack of cards in front of us for technology and business cases.
So let me pull the business one.
Okay.
I'm going to pull personal cars.
Personal cars. Who's ever done a robot that has to do with personal cars? I think there's a large elephant in the room that we're just going to leave standing there about the feasibility and challenges of personal cars and robots.
We're just going to cruise right by that one.
And look at that. The card I happen to pull is robot arms. So robot arms and personal cars.
You know what makes robots easier? Adding more robot subsystems to robots.
The robots are expanding to meet the needs of the expanding robots.
Exactly.
I think is how the famous quote, primarily from Civilization, goes.
Yeah.
So that being said, what do you think you could do with robot arms in cars? Like, you could use it to open things that the car is going by, like a gate it's trying to cross through. You could use it to help things out inside the car, maybe like unload the car or load the car.
Plug the car in or
to
refuel
plug the
it.
car in. I actually, there was a company that was doing robot arms for charging passenger cars. Really, really stupidly hard.
Really difficult.
But those robot arms weren't in the car.
Yeah.
So I don't think that counts.
No. It has to be in or on the car.
Yeah.
It has to be somehow permanently attached to the vehicle.
Yeah.
Not just in the space around.
So I think like a challenge that I'm already seeing with my couple of weeks of fatherhood is, I already am, let's say, a lackadaisical driver when it comes to what my hands are doing. My wife and our former roommate used to really dislike going for rides with me in my little stick shift car, because I'd be shifting and I'd be changing Spotify and I'd be monitoring the GPS all with my hand and looking down. So maybe like what would be useful is a secondary hand inside the car to do tasks like get snacks, grab my phone if it's fallen.
No. Here's what it is. Automatic shifter. Instead of, this is a classic
I
problem
had to
in
give
robotics.
up my stick shift car because my wife refused to learn.
Yeah.
If she only had to learn how to work the clutch.
This is classic robotics. I'm going to harp a little bit on humanoids right now. But this is the classic, like, I have a car that's manual. I want it automatic. How do I robot this? And robot hand that shifts it for you and not just, an automatic transmission.
But I think about when I was a kid going on road trips in the car, there'd be a cooler in the trunk with those nasty peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that looked incredibly fine before they went in the plastic bag. But now they've been in a sealed plastic bag with ice on it for 6 hours, and they feel like they're wet wet and soggy, and like you have to eat them because you know how expensive McDonald's is these days. So like I
feel you're sharing childhood trauma here. That's very specific to your scenario.
So I think like I think we need a robot arm, like maybe like on a rail along the center roof.
I was just thinking that.
Yep.
I was just thinking that. Car. You know, my inspiration was thinking that if we wanted to do all these things, you put a rail, kind of like the Canadarm, how it moves around the space station, where there's a mobile base that moves the arm. Because the problem with arms is always reach. Right. And humans don't realize it. It's this fun experiment to do if you want to figure out how difficult it is to make a robot arm, is try to reach for things around you without moving your body. Like, don't move your torso.
I'm unable to get the soda can that's about
like
2 feet
you
away
realize
from me
like
right now.
Everything is out of your reach at that point. Thoughtlessly, you'll slightly shift your torso to get your arm within reach of stuff. And robot arms don't tend to have that ability, so that their kind of envelope of workspace is very like surprisingly small for humans. So, but if you put it on a rail, then suddenly it can reach all the way to the front, all the way to the back. Especially if it's on the roof, it reaches through the window into the car to do something.
Well, I don't think it needs to be like on the roof. I think it's like on the interior roof, and maybe it's like a 4-foot arm. So if like I drop something in a seat well, it can grab that.
But how does it like open the gate or plug in the car?
I don't think it has to open gates or anything like that. Just like inside the car. Like I'm thinking this is just a like. I mean, maybe it could pop up and go through the sunroof, and then like, because I always worry about drive-throughs and getting like the ticket from the parking machine. So maybe it also handles that for me.
Right. So maybe what we do is we have to, just slightly redesign the way that cars are made, where there's a central monorail through the spine top of the car. And it has a carriage that drives up and down it. That has a exterior mounted arm and an interior mounted arm.
I'm sure the exterior mounted arm will be great for the aerodynamics.
Well, when it's driving at speeds, it like tucks itself in behind the air like frontage of the vehicle. Yeah. So it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
So let's focus on the interior. Right. I like the interior.
All right.
So some tasks that I think of it, like it could get things out of the trunk.
Right.
If you drop key objects of interest, like your phone, it can pick it up.
So it needs a really long reach then.
Yeah.
It needs like a hilariously long reach.
Maybe like 4 feet.
Yeah, but again, workspace, right? Like to reach something tucked under your seat from the roof of your car, it might be 4 feet linearly, but to actually travel through that space in a way that doesn't pierce the squishy human sitting there.
The squishy human can deal.
You probably need like 6 feet or so, to make a sane arc.
And it has to start looking like a Dr. Octopus arm.
Yeah, exactly. Like this thing's gonna be complicated.
Yeah, okay. Maybe it can't reach under your seat.
Yeah.
Like maybe it can reach the seats.
Yeah.
And like move like bags of food around.
Yep.
Or drinks around and get things out of the trunk of the car.
So there's this thing on rails that travels from the trunk to the front of the vehicle at will.
Yeah.
But
and to be clear, I'm thinking like this is like an SUV or a minivan.
Like a big car.
So the trunk isn't like an enclosed space.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and this somehow does not distract the driver.
No, of course it wouldn't, because drivers are responsible.
Yeah. Yeah. So on top of your stick shifting and GPS checking and Spotify moving.
Well, it's like voice commands. You say like, hey, arm, get me my phone. Or get me the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches out of the cooler in the back of the car.
I can just imagine the Looney Tunes, like, fine, it gets the peanut butter jelly sandwich. It unwraps it somehow magically. Like, that is not a thing robots can do, but let's say it somehow does
well,
that.
Well, lasers it apart.
From our previous episode.
Laser,
Chemical laser that ejects the cartridge. That's why we make it as a service. You got to replenish the cartridges. Anyway, so it does all that successfully. And the very last step, it's holding it out to you. And like those, online YouTube creator, I forget her name, but she was making shitty robots. It just like starts mashing it in your face as you're trying to drive.
Well, I mean, I think like it's more like Cobot when it's bringing you the sandwich. So like it might like get close to your face, but never actually like hit your face. And then like you basically grab the other side of the sandwich with your free hand and pull it towards you, but then you can let go and it goes back to position.
Wow. Yeah, that's not a troublesome controls problem at all. Control for a squishy, fragile peanut butter sandwich.
Yep.
At vibrational motion inside the vehicle and unpredictable humans.
Well, like why is vibrational motion so bad?
Well, because if you want it to be a cobot and you want it to be safe,
or even removing the cobot part, like why? What about this is hard from the fact that the car is moving?
So you're dealing with unexpected torques. So especially if you're going around corners or speeding up or slowing down, the robot arm suddenly has a gravity vector change.
Okay.
And if it's not just if it's not just so stupid powerful that it doesn't care.
Yep.
Which you wouldn't want to do in a car because it's dangerous.
Yeah, because then it would break through the car.
Right, or the humans.
While it went through the human.
The squishy humans would be in danger. Then
it would take my door off after it took my head off.
Right, right. So you can think of something like a Baxter robot that was made by Rethink that had these cable-driven arms, which are kind of inherently safe.
Yep.
But they're heavily affected by motion.
Yeah.
They're squishy, right? And even if you look at something more rigid like a UR arm, when it's in travel, if you're doing any kind of intelligent planning where you're not just moving from point A to point B blindly, you're trying to compensate for your payload and you're trying to avoid obstacles. Mm-hmm. And anything in your space, if it's all moving and shifting, it just makes that problem that much harder.
Like the stuff inside the car isn't moving that much. I mean, like there's like a low amount of vibe, but it's not like the seats are like flying back and forth every time you hit a speed bump.
No, but all your joints are getting accelerated in different directions.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you think of this multi-jointed arm, like your human arm.
Do these pressures affect the lifespan of the arm?
Hard to say. With a well-designed system, it should be fine. It shouldn't be that unreasonable. Yeah, no. I mean, probably not, maybe. Mm-hmm. I'd say the bigger thing is the sudden shocks would. So not even a collision, but even just going over speed bumps and stuff.
Yep.
That's a big shock.
Yeah.
And humans feel it. A robot arm is going to get strained pretty heavily.
I mean, if the average car drives 30,000 miles a year, let's say, I don't know, maybe a speed bump per 100 miles is fair.
Yeah.
Speed bump per 50 miles. So call that 3,000 to 6,000 speed bumps a year.
Yeah, I would be shocked if it can survive that sort of thing. if it's in use, right? Yeah. Of course, you can stow the arm to some safe position.
Yeah.
But if you constantly have to stow it every time the car is predicting a speed bump, it's going to be stowed 90% of the time.
Yeah.
It's practically practically constantly.
Yeah.
Arms are, especially soft arms, are just not good at dealing with that jarring motion.
One listener reached out recently and asked the state of arms that have sensing versus are just doing kind of blind things over and over again.
Yeah. How much
are there even, let's say, deployed arms that are sensing their surroundings and dynamically doing tasks against them?
Okay, like so when you say sensing, you mean like sensing
for
at
example,
distance.
like at a Toyota factory where an arm is installing a car door.
Yeah.
The arm is doing the same motion every single time. It doesn't have eyes. It doesn't have radar. It's just doing the same set of maneuvers over and over.
Yeah.
There are arms that can say grab a soda can off of a table that exist purely as R&D.
Yeah.
How many smart arms are there actually out there being used?
So if I had to guess, I would say 90+% of the arms on the planet are totally open loop, dumb, nonsensing.
Yep.
Then a further, 7-ish, 5-ish% have some sort of torque feedback. Yep. So they at least know that they're trying to push through something.
Yep.
And those you can make safe because it basically will stop if it hits something.
Yep.
The remaining 1 to 2% have any sort of remote sensing. It's very unusual.
Yeah.
Now, that depends on the task. There's one kind of caveat I'll clarify here is some arms that are used in like Delta arms that pick stuff up off a conveyor belt almost always do that optically guided.
Yep.
But that's, again, not the arm sensing it itself, as the optical guidance system gives it a target and the arm just snaps to that point. It doesn't actually know, it doesn't see, quote unquote, what it's doing.
Yep.
It's just being given a target by what happens to be a visual system.
And what would be your read on percentage of robot arms that are on moving bases?
Like sub 1%.
Yeah.
Very unusual.
So in other words, this would be, the 99.9th percentile arm. To exist in the first place.
Yep.
And then essentially we also have to make it deal with the 6,000 speed bumps a year.
Well, there's an even more
fun. And it has to figure out how to get my peanut butter sandwich out.
Well, there's an even more fun case where you probably don't want it to decapitate someone the first time you get into an accident.
Listen, kids these days are soft.
So it has to be an arm with built-in airbags around it that will fire.
Oh, the first time there's a car accident.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The first time there's a car accident, you don't want it to decapitate a person, right? Like that's why you secure everything in your car, including your people, because at collision speeds, it becomes really lethal really fast.
Yeah.
So you just have airbags just built around this thing that as soon as it collides,
so it just becomes a sausage that breaks your neck, but doesn't like decapitate you.
Yeah. And then certain car makers will blame you instead of the autonomous system. It'll be fun.
All right. And then like, let alone getting into the actual tasks. Those are all really, really easy.
Yeah.
Figuring out what I mean when I say, get me the peanut butter and jelly sandwich out of the back.
Yep.
Right. Though, like, to be fair, LLMs might make understanding those commands easier. It might make knowing what the back means easier, and what a cooler is easier, and what a peanut butter sandwich is easier.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just a small side project of AGI involved in this thing. That's like, whatever. ML, it'll fix it.
Well, I mean, if the arms started every trip by doing a full survey of the contents, by scurrying around your whole car, to looking at everything, reverse Google image searching everything, and building a labeled map of what it thinks is in the car. You could do that.
That's definitely what I wanted to do.
It'll be slightly distracting.
Yeah, especially if I'm trying to like do the chaos of getting kids organized in a minivan. I also want this arm flailing around at high speeds trying to photograph.
So this could maybe help buckle the kids into the car.
Yeah. You will learn soon. Actually, you probably have already seen the getting an infant into a car seat. The amazing amount of flailing.
We overspent on car seats, so we have pretty usefully expensive but effective car seat where he goes into it before he's in the car.
Yeah. So they snap in.
Yeah.
But even still, getting them into that seat, like getting the things buckled, and they're constantly flailing and fighting.
Well, it's more. I can't decide. I can never remember which things are supposed to go in between his legs and around his legs. Just fundamentally doesn't make sense. So, what do you think an arm like this costs?
Even a prototype of this thing would cost. A terrible prototype would cost $30,000-$50,000.
Nice.
An actual production model is probably $100K plus to make sure it doesn't decapitate you.
Let alone how much does it weigh?
Yeah, well, actually, that one it shouldn't be too bad because the shortest path to inherently safe is lightness.
Yeah. So
if it's light, you kind of save yourself a lot of trouble.
But even if like the entire system is 250 pounds, like including the compute for it and the power base and whatever, that might increase the weight of the car by 5 to 10% and decrease your fuel economy or range.
Yep.
A comparable amount.
Yeah. I mean, let's not forget the rail system on the roof that.
You need that.
Yeah, to have any sort of reach, to even feasibly be able to reach things, you'll need that.
So, nice extra $100,000 sticker price per car. What would you call this thing? The in-car chauffeur, 3,000.
Doc Ock. I don't know.
Coming to the newest Prius in 2038, Doc Ock 3000, your in-car chauffeur and an assistant. Moving right along. So a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to an investor of ours who seemed greatly concerned by the amount of things that we were doing. And basically we took this and led into a step of like, hey, what all do we do? And like, which parts of them are repeatable, which parts aren't. And essentially came up with a list that we started cranking out on a Friday of about 40 different standalone products that we have built and that we are offering to our customers. And these are things from, being able to estimate the location dimensions of a trailer that an autonomous vehicle is pulling without any sensors on that trailer. These are things like basically being able to turn on a LiDAR and use it and get valuable data out of it. And I thought, hey, these are a bunch of products and customers buy a series of these products. And I had a really interesting debate with Nicole, our head of marketing and podcast production and deliverables and account management, blah, 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 where she said, we can't call these things products, even though you could buy one of them and even though they're valuable on their own.
Nobody will take us seriously.
Yes, because of a company as small as you guys, if I learned that you had 40 products, I'd think, wow, this company must be terrible. And the realization I had was that's also just called robotics.
That's right. Robots are tough.
So to talk through that, the list of products we're launching, I think today, assuming that this is going out on the same day as that launch, but we'll see. But essentially every week for the next 20 weeks, we're going to launch 2 of these modules, as we're going to be calling them, which range from things like being able to interact with a Ackerman steering kinematic model, being able to use GPS denied localization, a whole bunch of things with a write-up for every one of these modules. But I guess a question I'd pose to you, Ilia, if we were doing a standalone robot with the same thought process of each of these things as an individual product, how many products would we need to get a robot that kind of sort of works?
If we were doing a very specific use case?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe pick a use case, not quite robot arms inside of cars, but maybe our autonomous bulldozer.
Yeah. So we've kind of talked about this before, but one of the main reasons we started this company and our architecture this way is we sort of realized that most of the effort to get a specific use case working is very similar to the effort to get a bunch of them working together. And it's maybe you save 30-40% of your effort, which is a lot, honestly.
Yeah, especially when you're working against a timeline and venture back dollars and blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. But it's not a 2x and it's not a 10x. And really what it is that you can cheat sort of when you're doing very application specific projects. So you can save a bunch of features that you don't need. Your concrete example, bulldozers, right? Bulldozers are tank driving, so I don't need an Ackermann model.
Yep.
I generally don't need to do GPS denied navigation, although sometimes you do.
Yep.
But generally speaking, bulldozers operate in the open. They have pretty decent GPS reception. Don't need to pull trailers. That's very unusual for bulldozers. So you can cut a bunch of these weird features off.
So instead of 40, maybe it's 25.
25, yeah, exactly. But you still need to process sensor data. You still need to path plan. You still need to do onboard processing. You still need it to be safe.
Yep.
Your margins for what safe means and what accurate means and what fast means change from application to application.
And maybe to flesh out like just how hard this stuff is. One of the first of these modules that we're launching is LiDAR fusion. Basically, if you have a LiDAR on the vehicle and plug it into a computer, we can get value out of that LiDAR.
Yeah.
As a 1 minute thing.
Yeah.
What all needs to be built to get value out of a LiDAR?
Yeah.
That is plugged into a computer.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we were talking about this earlier, I had mentioned, I kind of think of LiDAR as just the starting point. So just getting the data from the LiDAR is already difficult enough because LiDAR will generate a ton of data, several hundred megabits per second, which can flood a network points of just raw data, right? The LiDAR construction itself is very complicated, of course, but we don't have to do that piece. But even just getting that data into memory in a way that the robot can use is already a challenge. But that's just the starting point. Once that's done, you then have to actually take those points. You have to filter them. So you have to filter out the noise. There's inevitably dust motes that gets in the way, or rain or snow or whatever. Then you need to do things to make it useful. So if you just have points in your scene, you have to have the robot understand what is part of a ground, what is part of obstacle A, what is part of obstacle B. How do I know what the dimensions of obstacle B are just from a series of points? As my vehicle moves around or as that obstacle moves around, how do I track that those series of points are the same series of points across different scans? And then how can I predict what those series of points are going to do so that I can plan intelligently around them?
And you're not even talking about predicting where an object's going to drive. You're just talking about when I drive forward 10 feet, the points that are bouncing off of this boulder are going to be slightly different points in more or less the same location.
Exactly.
That's the prediction you're talking about here.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's on top of that, the layer of if those points are moving, because it's not a boulder, but a person, how do you then not leave this trail? But
that's not within this module.
No, exactly. That's a totally separate thing. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So these are foundational. So if you think about the layers here, it's getting the data across the network. It's then filtering it. It's then generating clusters. It's then putting those clusters into some sort of coordinate reference frame, odometry or map frame or whatever. And then it's actually using them after that point. So just to get to the point where it's somewhat usable for your robot is already 2 or 3 different, very large, open, complex problems.
If you had an experienced roboticist who maybe they've worked around LiDAR before, they've interacted with ROS, they can do stuff in C++. How long do you think it takes for them to build just the stuff to get something valuable out of a LiDAR?
Yeah. And again, to come back to our earlier point, the trick is, are they very application specific? So if they're on a very flat plane, imagine like an airport landing strip, the ground is so flat that you can easily detect it and strip it away. But if it's something like a bulldozer, the ground can be quite complex. And so you're going to spend a bunch of your time just detecting
figuring out what the ground is.
Yeah. And that is a cutting edge research topic. We've tried probably half a dozen algorithms. Some of them work well in some circumstances, some work in others. But just that problem, if you're in a slightly complex environment, not a road, you're talking 6 months to get a decent solution that's fairly generalizable. Then you have the problem of clustering. So when you're doing filtering and clustering, there's certain assumptions we make. For example, if I can see the ground and I can see all the objects
and how long
it,
is that figuring out where the ground is if you have a flat plane?
If you have a flat plane, it's quite a bit simpler. So maybe, assuming your vehicle's moving around, you got to subtract out your gravity a little bit and your acceleration. Maybe 2 to 3 weeks to get a decent solution.
Only 2 to 3 weeks to assume that things are flat, compared to maybe a weekend to build an e-commerce website. Just to call out that comparison. So the rest of the LiDAR stuff, after you figure out where ground is, what's the rest of that look like in terms of how long it takes to build?
Yeah. So to give you a concrete example, filtering, right? If you have a bunch of points and you see there's a small cluster of points floating in midair, is that noise? Is that a bird that flew by? Is that dust? Is that
something an anvil hanging from a rope, an invisible
that you can't
rope?
See,
yep.
Right. And so that kind of heuristic / data filtering to get that filtering step is also a challenge.
Yep.
Right now, there's a bunch of cutting edge papers on how do you filter dust from LiDAR point clouds. Can you use a machine learning model? Can you use kind of assumption on the ground plane and extend it and do projections? That's another, to do that well, again, depending on your circumstances. Can you do it on a sunny day with no wind on a flat surface? Yeah, sure. Can you do it when it's a dust storm on a complicated surface? Basically, nobody solved that yet.
So going back to the what's the range of time that an experienced person from getting a new LiDAR to value coming out of it?
Yeah, I mean, again, it comes back to your complexity.
The range.
But the range, yeah, exactly. So the range would be, if you have a very simple use case and you want a prototype level quality, you could do it in a month or two. And of course, just like us, you should probably use ROS and build on top of it so that you already pre-bake a lot of this stuff. If you have a complex environment with difficult scenarios, you're talking multiple years.
Yep.
To get a good production quality.
And like if you want a reliable demo, probably in the year range or so.
Yeah.
Which is to say a lot harder than an e-commerce website, a lot harder than DocuSign 5.0, just to get value out of LiDARs. And like, I think like on one hand, this discussion is part of why we thought, all right, LiDAR Fusion itself is a product. It is a thing that we could hand to a customer so they don't need to spend that year.
And it's something we sell today, honestly.
Yep. And it's something that we sell today. On the other hand, 40 products seems like too many. So if we were just a bulldozer company, maybe we need to run LiDARs, we need to run tank steering, we need to run a number of these different modules, but maybe 25 or so. Yeah. But the fundamental challenge is there aren't that many people who just want to buy software to automate just bulldozers. So we'd probably also have to do hardware ourselves. And I mean, speaking in a quick generality, building all the hardware to retrofit a bulldozer probably looks like another 25 hardware modules.
Yeah.
And the software product to say, here's where you want to bulldoze, it starts to look like another 5 to 10 modules. So to go back to Nicole's, pushback on, wow, 40 products is a lot for a 10-person company. If we were a 10-person autonomous bulldozer company, we'd probably have 80 modules.
Yeah. Yeah. Of which we could sell probably none. Except for the whole package.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's part of why so many robotics companies end up going full stack.
Exactly.
Because, there's not that many people in the world who can use just an autonomy layer for bulldozers, or even just an autonomy layer plus a retrofit kit for bulldozers. They start to need an app to interact with that autonomy, and they start to maybe they can't even hire people who can interact with that app because of how much of an afterthought that app was after your first 50 to 60 products. So you end up just being bulldozers as a service company.
And because you're trying to do so much of this stack, you can't possibly spend time making it flexible.
Yeah.
So again, it makes it very difficult to integrate with anything else. Any kind of change in your trajectory as a business, or if you want to partner with someone, becomes a very big undertaking.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, it costs more and it takes more time to do a more generalized approach.
Yeah.
But you may end up with an infinitely more sellable system in a lot of ways.
So what are some other highlights of this campaign in terms of other modules, not products, definitely not products that we're going to be launching? Or what are some other neat ones you think?
Yeah. So I think another neat one, we've posted on the blog post about this before, but we've really found there hasn't been a lot of research or publications on center pivot vehicles.
What are some examples of a center pivot vehicle?
Yeah, so I hadn't seen these before either, but once you get above a certain size of vehicle, especially in construction or quarry, mining or forestry vehicles. They become so massive that your classic kind of car steering, Ackerman steering, doesn't work anymore.
Yep.
And so instead, the entire vehicle will bend in half to steer.
And these are common across like things like wheel loaders and articulated dump trucks and woodland skidders and a bunch of different vehicles. And it's funny, like we never seen this before our first vehicle, and we've since seen it like 15 times.
Yeah, and it's
mine clearing vehicles actually frequently have center pivot.
Yeah, and I
remember bragging to a guy who builds mine clearing vehicles. It's like all of my vehicles have that kinematic model.
Yeah, and it's surprising that there's been so little literature written about this, because it looks like a kinematic bicycle model to start with.
Yep.
But then you realize you can't actually turn in place. So if you think you're riding a bicycle, if you're standing still, you can turn your wheel to point in some direction and then press on the pedals and to start going, which is great. So if you're in a tight spot, you can kind of pre-steer your way out. With a center pivot vehicle, it's so massive, you can't drag your front tires left or right.
Well, it's not even necessarily the vehicle has to be that big. It's just like from a proportion perspective, the motor that twists the vehicle is a lot smaller than the rest of the vehicle.
Yeah.
So even if the whole center pivot vehicle was the size of a Prius, that would still be a relatively small thing needing to drag the wheels laterally across the ground.
And most of your wheels aren't built for that kind of stress.
Yeah, it's not good for them.
So when you're doing your planning, your motion planning, you have to predict ahead of time how far you're going to have to turn and kind of preemptively escape places where you might get stuck that you can't do the same as a bicycle model or even a unicycle model where you can just turn in place.
Which is why for most of those times we're frequently looking at our look ahead distance to figure out where we'll need to position ourselves 5 seconds from now, so that we don't need to bend too much on the fly.
Exactly. So that's been a really neat feature, and luckily that unlocks a big chunk of mining and quarrying and kind of that sort of space for us.
Given how hard lidars are, what is another, let's say, module of ours that everyone is doing, in air quotes, for those of you not watching our video feed, that everyone does but is actually stupidly hard and not particularly core for anybody?
So we were starting to talk about this a little bit. It's that once you've clustered your objects and you can track them from frame to frame relatively well from your own motion, so-called ego motion, what you want to start to do is try to figure out, are there objects moving independently of you?
Yep.
So your vehicle's driving one way and there's a person standing there. You have a different behavior than if the person starts walking towards you.
Yep.
You should be more careful, of course. Doing that kind of clustering and tracking means that you have to be fairly certain about your own position to then be able to subtract out your own motion from the motion of this other cluster of objects, which means it's no longer just a pure LiDAR problem. It's a localization and LiDAR and sensor fusion problem all at once.
Yep.
And that's challenging.
Yep.
Autonomous vehicles, you'll see videos of, Tesla's dashboard, for example, will show other cars and show their motion. And that's great, but a lot of the time, a lot of the behind the scenes work is still looking at these vehicles, especially in the ML space, as a shot by shot understanding of where the vehicle is. So it's kind of this really discretized, 10 times a second, where's the vehicle, and not actually trying to track across time the same vehicle and its same kinematics at all moments. So that's the kind of cheat that a lot of people are, we're tracking the vehicle, but not really. They're tracking it frame by frame instead of actually a motion profile.
Yeah. Well, with all that being said, what are we talking about next week, Ilia?
Well, I think we're going to talk about how we've missed a bunch of weeks due to busyness and kids. We might continue to do so. So we'll try to get these out more commonly, but there's going to be some time of chaos.
Yep.
We are going to be at CES.
Yep.
Which come chat with us.
So come see us at CES. We'll be at some extracurricular activities that reach out to us. Maybe we can get you an invite for if we like you, or if we have extra tickets more realistically. But we'll have a booth. We'll be showing off a couple of robots as we did last year, and there should be some more robots coming soon. A lot of exciting stuff is happening that we can't quite talk about yet.
Yeah. But keep an eye on our website. We'll probably do a design refresh sometime. Start to announce those features. We'll have some cool videos.
You mean modules?
Yeah, sure.
We had a
Features,
massive
modules,
argument
products.
about this that I just barely conceded that we're going to call them modules, even though I hate the word modules because it sounds like I'm SAP, terrible land. And features sounds too small. Yeah. And everything ends up being way bigger than what other people sell as products. So that is the challenge at the end of the day of robots. And with that, thank you all so much for joining us. We'll talk to you real soon.
See you next time.